Hi, this is Miss V, and welcome back. This is World History, and we are in a new unit called Exploration. And today we're looking at the Guided Note 6.1, and we're going to be talking about European exploration and expansion. So let's get started. All right, so your unit today is that you should be able to summarize the causes of European nations that would lead them to exploration and being able to identify those major voyages and the European nations that sponsored these explorers to explore. All right, so basically that's what your standard means. And then also being able to answer this question: what were the motivations and also the effects behind European political and economic expansion? So, in other words, what motivated them to want to expand westward from Europe, and also what were the political reasons behind that, and how did that affect those areas and Europe as well? All right, so let's continue. All right, so before 1500 and 1800, Europeans always had this idea of expanding and moving and traveling beyond to explore the world, right? And you're going to see that in a minute. The Vikings did it centuries before. However, the major European nations that we now know of, such as Spain, Portugal, England, France, etc., they did want to explore other countries based mainly on a trade. They wanted to expand their empire, okay, and gain resources from different parts of the world, mainly Asia, because that's what they knew. All right. So in the late 1200s, and I think this will be your answer for number 1 and 2, Europeans they started to gain an interest even more in exploration because of this guy right here, which is Marco Polo. And Marco Polo wrote a book that's commonly known as the Travels of Marco Polo, or the Travels. And he detailed his experiences traveling in Asia. And when he came back, he brought a lot of different things like spices and different other types of goods and so forth. So Europeans were wowed, they were excited, and in terms of learning about these exotic different things and different products or resources that they never really knew about and never knew that existed. So, because of that, traders now wanting to gain access to more of these goods and more of these resources, they try to gain access to Asia as much as possible to get these precious metals and spices like silver and, different spices that we know of today. All right. So this will be your answer for 3 and 4. Now, the Ottoman Empire controlled land between Europe and Asia, and they had to pay special taxes, or the merchants in those areas would make the price of those spices and those resources higher than usual so that they could get their cut, right? So European nations and merchants, explorers, what have you, they're like, we need to figure out a way to get to Asia without having to go that way, right? So because of that, now the age of exploration in Europe started to boom because they're now seeking another way to get to Asia, to get these resources, to get these goods so that they can continue trading. But these are the main factors of why Europeans were motivated to explore distant lands. One, because of God, and you can remember this as GGG, or the 3 Gs: God, gold, and glory. All right. Europeans had this zeal, or this religious fire to convert people, especially people that they just encountered in newer lands or lands that they never seen before, and they wanted them to convert to Christianity, okay, because they felt that their religion was, let us say, superior than the nations that they explored, right? So they figured that converting them to Christianity would be best, okay? Also, they were motivated by gold because they felt that the more gold or the more silver that they had, that there was a show of being prosperous. And there's a name for that we will get to in a minute. So they wanted to get more gold, more silver, etc., all of these precious metals. And then also the glory. They saw this life of adventure and traveling, but also because of this race to explore, they saw this as the glory of that nation, that this nation would be so powerful and great if they led this expedition and found these, or not found, but they encountered these new lands, right? So that's pretty much those three reasons why, or the motives behind why the European nations started to explore distant lands. All right. So how did they get there? Of course, they had to figure out some ways in order to get there. So this will be your answer for 5 and 6, I believe. Yes. So they started using sailing technology, a new sailing technology, to help them explore further, right, than just going to places that they knew of, right? So now they had a ship like this, which is called a caravel, and caravels were able to help them move faster than other ships, right? So they were able to cut through the waves and move faster, and be able to travel longer distances using a caravel than using the other ships, right? And they also had other technology as more advanced cartography. They were more accurate in their map making, and that's what cartography means. It means to create maps, okay? They also used something like this, which we talked about before with the Islamic Empire, the Islamic Caliphate, the astrolabe. If you remember the Islamic Caliphate that we talked about before, they were the one responsible for inventing an astrolabe, okay? And now they're using that same instrument to explore and plot the latitudes of different places as they travel. So now they're able to plot those latitudes and make maps and being able to travel further distances. Also, as you see down here, they started using magnetic compasses to chart their courses. So now because they're charting their courses using this technology, they are now able to go farther and faster than before. All right, so now we have a race for riches. The first European nation to take the lead in exploration was Portugal, okay? And they started in the 1400s, the early 1400s. Two of the most important explorers for Portugal was Bartholomew Diaz and Vasco da Gama, okay? Bartholomew Diaz was one that reached the southern tip of Africa, which is called now the Cape of Good Hope, okay? And Vasco da Gama, he was able to go around the Cape of Good Hope. He crossed the Indian Ocean and made it to India, and then returned back to Portugal with a cargo full of spices, that same caravel that we talked about. So that was a big feat for Portugal, because now they were able to figure out a path to get to India without having to go through the Ottoman Empire, right? And now also quickly following the Portugal was Spain, and Spain started their expeditions in the late 1400s. Two of those important explorers for Spain was, of course, Christopher Columbus and Ferdinand Magellan, okay? And Christopher Columbus is actually an Italian explorer. He was not Spanish, he was Italian, so his actual name is Cristoforo Colombo, okay? But he was commissioned or sponsored by Spain. In other words, Spain gave him, which was Queen Ferdinand and Isabella. We talked about them before when we talked about them taking out the Muslims and instituting Catholicism as the main religion in Spain. The same Ferdinand and Isabella sponsored Christopher Columbus to sail their first expedition in 1492. He was determined to find a western route to Asia, meaning going west and traveling around the globe to get to Asia. However, he didn't know that there was lands there, and he ended up in the Americas, specifically in the Caribbean, what was called Hispaniola by him. Okay, but there was a different name because native peoples lived there already, specifically the Taínos and the Arawak native peoples. Okay, but because he found that area, he still thought that he was in India, which is why they call that area the West Indies, because he thought that he was in India. He called it the West Indies. However, that wasn't the case. He was in the Americas, and he continued to explore that area for 4 more expeditions. Ferdinand Magellan led an expedition, and he found a path to get to India through South America. So he went around South America, the tip of South America, into the Pacific Ocean, and he made it into the Philippines. However, when he got to the Philippines, the natives attacked him and they killed him. So he was never able to make it back to Spain. But he is considered to be the first to circumnavigate or sail around the world. All right. Now, this would probably be, I think this is your answer for number 8. Okay. So if you're looking for the answer for number 8, it's here. Okay. Now, because Portugal and Spain are doing this race to, get trading and riches and so forth and, travel or exploration, now other Europeans are like, oh, we got to be on this too, right? Of course. So they're going to jump in as well. So now we have France and England that's jumping into this race for riches. And they have 2 important explorers. One was John Cabot, and he explored parts of New England, which would be what we now call as the states of Vermont and Maine and New Hampshire, parts of Canada, which is called Newfoundland, and so forth. So that's where he explored. Pedro Cabral, and I'm sorry I didn't highlight that part, he explored parts of America, South America, and that colony then became Brazil. And he was Portuguese, so just keep that in mind. But Americo Vespucci, he also explored different parts of the Americas, and he started to journal his explorations. And because of that, today historian, I'm not sure exactly when it was, those areas was bestowed or called America from his name, but apparently that's where the name America comes from. Okay, as I mentioned before, primary sources does provide evidence that the Vikings explored the Americas, specifically parts of what we now know as Canada, way before Columbus ever did, and many of these European nations did centuries before. All right, so just wanted to make sure that that's verified and kept in mind that a lot of these European nations, they were exploring and they did not know, but there were other European nations, such as we talking about here, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, that were Viking territory that explored before. All right, so the reason why the Aztec and the Inca died or was demolished or decimated so quickly, and the Spanish was able to build such an empire in the Americas, was because they carried guns, they carried diseases with them, and their horses, which gave them an advantage. Horses are not indigenous to the Americas, so seeing something like that and being able to ride on a horse with a gun and then so forth is more an advantage for European, especially the Spanish Empire, compared to the Aztec and Inca that didn't have those sources, right? So that's why they died off so quickly, especially with disease, as you see here in this picture. All right, so conquistadors. And one of the conquistadors of the Spanish Empire, and how he conquered the Aztecs, was Hernan Cortez. he brought in a Spanish force, meaning soldiers, and into the capital of the Aztec Empire, which was Tenochtitlan, right? When Cortez arrived, Montezuma, who was the Aztec emperor at the time, welcomed him in because they thought that he was a god. Needless to say, of course, he wasn't, and Hernan Cortez and his troops came in, took Montezuma hostage, and pillaged the city. Many of the Aztecs also died from the European disease that they brought with them, which was smallpox and measles and other types of diseases, and many of them died, and you'll find out more about that in the next guided notes video. And because of that, Cortez and his allies, which he did ally with some neighboring Native American tribes to take over, to gain control of the Aztecs. And he was able to do that to be able to reconquer Tenochtitlan, and now the Spanish Empire was able to expand throughout all of Mexico. And here's another conquistador, Francisco Pizarro. He arrived in the South America in 1531, and he decimated the Inca Empire. He took advantage of a civil war that was happening in the area. Again, like Cortez, he took the Inca emperor hostage, and after killing him, they destroyed the Inca capital. They decimated the population of the Inca because of the diseases like smallpox and so forth, decimated them. And now he established this new empire, or this new capital called Lima, which we now call Lima, Peru. And that was the new Spanish Empire in South America. All right. Now, there were other European rivals that were in this race for riches, gold, glory, etc. So remember those three G's that I talked about: gold, God, gold, and glory, right? So the Dutch, which is the Netherlands, the French, and the English, they all came out to try to boost their wealth as well, right? And they also explored the Americas and formed settlements in different colonies. They were also motivated by the promise of gold and other precious metals, and also, seeking to convert inhabitants and so forth that they encountered. But they heard about all of this wealth in the Americas, and they wanted a piece of the pie too. Okay, the Dutch was able to form the Dutch West India Company, which was the first joint stock company, or of the first chartered company that literally put money in to do these explorations so that they can make money off of it on behalf of the empire, on behalf of the Netherlands. Okay. However, the Dutch West India Company didn't last because they lacked the resources and the power to maintain it throughout their colonies that they had in Brazil and the Caribbean. Okay. And last but not least, the French also came in. They explored parts of what we now call as Canada with Champlain. They named it New France, and one of those places that the colonies that they settled was called Quebec. Okay, and that was the first permanent French settlement in the Americas. And they also was able to inhabit what we call Louisiana today. Louisiana was a French territory, a French colony. Okay, and then meanwhile, the English started settling in places in Virginia and Massachusetts Bay in the early 1600s. Particularly, Virginia colony was 1620, so to speak. And of course, Massachusetts Bay colony followed as well. So by the end of the 17th century, which was the 1600s, the English had established most control over the eastern seaboard of North America, which we know as the 13 colonies, right, in the United States today. And they also set up sugar plantations and other resources, cotton plantations, of course, in the south part of the United States, or what we call the United States today. and also places in the Caribbean. All right. So thank you for watching. This is the first part of the Age of Exploration unit, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.